The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Golenbock University. First show of 2018. And we've got the three Baseball Mashuganas in-house. Al Blumkin, I'm Ralph Tyko, and the Professor, Peter Golenbock. Happy New Year, guys.
Yes, Happy New Year
Happy
to
New Year.
both of you and all your listeners.
Good. Glad we got through it.
Ralph, let's limit the Durocher's years with the Giants the way you initially suggested.
Okay.
Because
that's who
you
we're
can't
going
do
to talk about.
his whole life justice in half an hour.
No, you can't. One of the most interesting men that I've ever read about, and certainly one of the most interesting men in baseball, Leo Durocher. I want Al to. We're going to talk about the New York Giants years, and Al Blumkin, take it away.
Well, the story of and Peter covers this in Bums, which I just reread about 2 weeks ago. Peter covers this in detail of Durocher's move from the Dodgers to the Giants. He was suspended in 1947 for associating with gamblers, and when he came back, he and Branch Rickey had some major disagreements in 1948, one of which was they had a catching problem, and Rickey wanted to use Roy Campanella to integrate the American Association. So he was without a catcher for, because the catcher was Bruce Edwards, who had a bad arm, and Gil Hodges was already being transferred to first base, so they had no real catcher until Campanella was brought back in and brought back up to the majors in July. And the other thing that they had big disagreements because he had a lot of store-arm pitchers. And he, was pressuring Rickey to go out and get some pitchers, and Rickey didn't want to do it. So they came to a parting of the ways after Rickey had, spent most of his time with the Cardinals and the Dodgers defending Durocher and all his questionable activities. And the Giants, Horace Stone was ready to fire Mel Ott, who was an idol there, but the team was going nowhere, doing nothing. And Stone approached Rickey about hiring Bert Schotten, who had been the Dodgers manager during Durocher's suspension. And Rickey, to Stoneham's surprise, offered him Durocher instead of Schotten. So the move was made, and Durocher had been a hated figure for years up in the Polo Grounds. All of a sudden became the Giant manager, and there were probably some Giant fans that couldn't deal with this at all.
Right.
But I remember it. I remember it when it happened because I was only 5 at the time. Yeah. But Durocher took over the Giants, who had a lot of sluggers and very little speed, very little defense. And when Stoneham asked him at the end of the 1948 season how he thought the team was, Durocher had one comment: says, "Back up the truck."
Yes.
And he basically got rid of everybody that was on the team except for Bobby Thompson, Whitey Lockman, and the pitcher Larry Jansen.
Well, may I ask Al and Peter, was not the acquisition of Dark and Stanky from
Boston Braves? That was after 1949.
Was that not the most significant move in turning
the
Giants?
It had two edges. It made the Giants into contenders, and it was the first step in driving the Braves out of Boston.
Oh.
Yeah. Because they could never find replacements, and they went downhill. And the last year in Boston, they drew a whopping 281,000 fans.
Right. And to top it off, they got Antonelli as well.
That was later. That was before 54.
Okay, but
they sent Buddy Carr, who was the shortstop, who the Giants' regular shortstop, who couldn't hit, and Sid Gordon and Willard Marshall, two outfielders who were not exactly gazelles. And they wound up getting Stanky, who, Durocher has had in Brooklyn, and Alvin Dark to be their double play combination. And so by 1950, they started to get a lot better. Two of the other things that happened in 1950 was that they finally brought up Monty Irvin full-time from the minor leagues. He had been an all-star in the Negro Leagues playing for the Newark Eagles. And
did Leo Durocher pull the strings in the front office for the Giants? Was he behind the Dark Stanky trade?
Yeah. And there was some, minor league pitcher whose name escapes me right now, who Stone was ready to hold up the trade, and according to what I've read, Durocher's went up to Stone's office and says, "You're going to hold this trade up for this guy?" He says, "You nuts?" But Durocher pushed for the trade.
Okay.
Yeah, another little thing that happened, and two other things happened in 1950, pitching-wise. Sal Magley had returned from the Mexican League and was being used sparingly until a couple of months into the season when the Giants were desperate for starting pitchers, and they threw Magley out as starter, and he wound up going 18-4 for the season.
Right.
And they also picked up Jim Hearn from the Cardinals for a waiver price, and he turned out to win the ERA title in the National League in 1950. Those days it was 10 games as a complete games as a qualification, which is something, of course, now would be a total joke. But they finished fast closing third in 1950. As I said, Durocher got rid of, outside of Wally Lockman and Bobby Thompson of the regular position players, he had gotten rid of all the rest of them because they didn't meet what he wanted for the team.
And of course,
Lockman and Thompson were pretty young and fast at that time, and so he built the team on speed. They didn't have a hell of a lot of power.
No.
Either in 51.
Also, Don Mueller became the regular right fielder in 1950.
Right. And Lockman and I think Lockman was in left for a while.
Yeah, Lockman was an outfielder. Thompson was in center field, and Mueller was in right field. Monty Irvin was the first baseman. He beat out a stiff by the name of Tookie Gilbert for that job. And Henry Thompson was the third baseman that year.
Hank Thompson.
Henry Thompson.
There was Hank Thompson.
Yeah.
Maybe, Peter, you can tell us, if you would, something about Hank Thompson that maybe we don't know, or how he fit into it all.
Well, Hank Thompson was another African-American player, and he came up to the Giants, and another African-American player, a fellow who had been playing in Birmingham by the name of Willie Mays. Willie Mays was, 20 years old, 21 years old when he came up. And Thompson and Mays were fortunate because it was an era of terrible, terrible racism. Jackie had come up in 1947, but only a handful of players had really come up, between 1947 and 51, because there were still a lot of teams like the Boston Red Sox and the Philadelphia Phillies whose owners were racist and they didn't want African-American players.
Well, Harry Thompson had come up with the Browns in 47. He was one of two that came up to the Browns in 1947 and didn't make it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you wonder when these players don't make it.
Yeah.
It was for a couple of reasons. And one of the reasons, of course, is because they were constantly being screamed at and called really, really nasty names. And if you didn't have the demeanor of a Jackie Robinson, who took all of that crap and still, played all-star baseball, if you didn't have his skill and his temperament, you looked in the mirror one day and said, why am I doing this for crappy money? The Dodgers had a pitcher who came up in 48, I guess it was, and I can't remember his name, but
Dan Bankhead.
Dan Bankhead, who was supposed to be this really terrific pitcher, But he couldn't stand being screamed at and called the N-word all the time. And it just was too much for him, and he disappeared very quickly. There was another Dodger pitcher who came up, and he disappeared as well. Now, as you know, of course, Newcomb came up, and he was fabulous. Campanella, he came up, and he was fabulous. But
you might be referring to Joe Black.
No, that was later on.
No. Joe Black.
Black didn't come up until 1952.
Joe Black did just fine. No, there was another pitcher whose name escapes me.
Roy Partlow. Was that the name?
Partlow.
Yeah.
Roy Partlow. Very good.
Thank you.
Yes.
But with the Giants, they had a manager. And we're talking about, our guy here, who
Leo.
in the 30s, Leo Durocher in the 1930s, was pushing for African Americans to come up to the major leagues, and pushing to the extent that he gave interviews to the communist magazine, who quite frankly cared more about civil rights than they cared about anything else in that newspaper. But Durocher was so outspoken about it that the baseball commissioner called him up and said, you got to, Kennesaw Mountain Landis told him, you keep your mouth shut. You just be quiet. Because Landis, of course, who died in 44, was as responsible as anybody else for making sure that no African American came up and played baseball in the major leagues. But after he died, after Jackie came up, you still had to have an owner willing to bring up black players. And Stoneham was willing to do it. And he had a manager in Leo Durocher who had been wanting to bring up black players for a good 10 years. And so he took this kid, this Willie Mays kid, saw how talented he was, and really sort of became like a second father to him and protected him and told him how fabulous he was. There was a point there where Willie was in something of a slump, and Willie was incredibly upset. And, if he had had a different kind of a manager, maybe he would have ended up back in the minors, and maybe he would have disappeared forever. Though, of course,
Peter, one of the things that was ironic about when Willie Mays was called up, the Giants had an infielder named Artie Wilson.
Yes.
Who they outrighted to the Pacific Coast League because they had a quota of 4 with Mays, Thompson, Irvin, and their third-string catcher, Ray Nobley. They had that was the quota. But, of course, a lot of teams at that stage had quotas of 0.
Yeah, quotas of 0 is absolutely right. But, as we saw under Leo Durocher's tutelage, Willie Mays very quickly became perhaps the finest player in the whole league. And that was Durocher's doing.
We all know about 1951.
Yeah, and in 1954, where he made that incredible catch off Vic Wertz in the World Series. And then
in 1951, what he did early in the season was he had Monty Irvin, who hated first base, and Whitey Lockman switched positions. Lockman came into first, and Monty went out to left also. When Bobby Thompson was in a slump, that's when they brought Mays up and installed him in center field. And when Hank Thompson, who was known to hit the bottle, was having some problems, they put Bobby Thompson at third base. Mm-hmm. That's how that's basically the lineup they had.
Moved Hank Thompson over to second base.
No, Hank Thompson was played right field the World Series because Mueller had broken his ankle sliding at the third base on Lockman's double.
And it was the first time 3 African Americans played the same outfield.
Yeah, but Hank Thompson was only there because Mueller had busted his ankle and sliding at the third base right before Bobby Thompson's home run and couldn't play.
Right.
Yeah, they had an outfielder then named Pintar Tung, who was, when he came out of the Army, supposed to be a combination of Babe Ruth and Walter Johnson. Didn't quite work out that way. And the only thing he's noted for is going into run for Mueller when Mueller broke his ankle at that point.
Yes. But he was one of those can't miss prospects.
Oh yeah.
at two positions. And
yeah, I posted about him when the Angels signed that Japanese kid the other week.
Right.
Pitching outfield, who knows what this guy can do or not. Yeah.
We'll find out.
Somebody mentioned Johnny Lindell a while back on one of these podcasts. He reminded me of Johnny Lindell.
Yeah, Lindell became a pitcher after his career as an outfielder was over.
Lindell was a tremendously talented ball player. I had the pleasure of interviewing Johnny for my Dynasty book. And what a sweetheart. He lived in a mobile home overlooking the Pacific Palisades. And he just absolutely could not have been happier in his retirement. A guy who absolutely loved the game. He was, a Yankee. He made his mark with the Yankees, of course. And then he went, I believe, to Philadelphia, where he became a pitcher and a damn good one.
He pitched most of that season with the Pirates.
Pirates.
They had him, and they had a catcher named Mike Sandlock, who was brought up just to catch Lindell, because Lindell was a knuckleball pitcher.
Right.
And they sold both of them to the Phillies about a month left in 53, and both of them after like a week in 54 were gone.
Yeah.
In fact, Mike Sandlock made it to 100, and he's Mike Sandlock's son, Mike E. Sandlock, is a Facebook friend of mine.
Oh, that's very nice.
But the thing, I thought what's ironic was in 1952, they had made a Stanky had been traded to the Cardinals to become their manager after 51, and they installed Davey Williams full-time at second base. Mm-hmm. And they finished 4.5 games behind the Dodgers. And I thought that was a better job. Durocher did a better job that year than in 51 because Mays, after 34 games, Mays went into the military for, the rest of that season in all of 1953. And Irvin had broken his leg in a sliding up to second base in an exhibition game, and he missed about 2/3 of the season.
Huh. Okay.
So it was a real patchwork. And the big addition they made that year was Hoyt Wilhelm.
Right. Who was a starter?
Yeah.
He was a starter. He started out for quite a few years as a starter.
Yeah, he was 15-3 that year.
And home run, his first at-bat.
Never hit one after,
Never hit another one. Yeah.
So in 53, they finished in 5th place, and in fact, Dark actually came in and pitched in one game. They were just doing things because they were going nowhere. Then when Mays came out of the Army for 54, and they made the trade sending Bobby Thompson to the Braves, essentially for Johnny Antonelli and Don Little.
Yeah, Don Little. Yeah.
And Bobby Thompson broke his ankle in spring training with the Braves and was replaced by Henry Aaron. So Bobby Thompson, in addition to his home run, was replaced both by Willie Mays and Henry Aaron.
Not bad.
Quick
which is
Don
not bad.
Little story. Don Little was the one who pitched.
Yeah, gave the home run to Walter Wirtz. Yeah.
Right. He comes back to the dugout and he tells Leo, "Well, I got my man."
Yeah.
He hit it about 457 feet.
Yeah.
I got my man.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story.
And Dodgers had a bad year because Campanella had a bad hand, and he batted .207, and Newcomb, coming out of the Army, had a very mediocre year. He was 9-8, but the Giants managed to beat them by 5 games, and to stun everybody, they swept the Indians, who had won 111 games.
They sure did.
But Alvin Dark came out with a book a number of years ago, which I have, called "When in Doubt, Fire the Manager." And Dark said that in the book that the Giants and the Indians used to barnstorm together because they were the only two teams training in Arizona. And so they played them about 20 exhibition games. They said the Indians had no left-handed starters. They were very slow running, and their defense wasn't all that good. So they were not intimidated. Of course, if that first game was played anywhere else, it might have been a whole different story.
Okay. Hey, 2 things before we go off tonight. It's a short show. I want to tell Peter that Al Blumkin, Blumkin. I'm nervous about this. Al was the MVP, most valuable podcaster at Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.
Oh, isn't that
for the
wonderful?
Year 2017.
Fabulous.
Incredibly well deserving. I can't begin to tell you, without Al's support, help, just his steadiness, there would be no Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'll remember that when my next contract comes up.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. You're going to get twice as much as
I'm getting now, right? Yeah.
And not just what you're getting, what anybody gets.
Yeah.
That's it.
And,
yeah.
So I will remember that, and I will also say that we're starting, debuted another show on this network. It is Bronx Roots with David Hubler, who's been a guest on this show and whom Peter knows.
I do indeed.
So I'm real proud of that. I'm real proud of it all. You guys are terrific. In the interest of the Golden Globes, we're going to cut this one short, and I'm going to thank you both for being here and thank everybody for listening. If you're out there and enjoy any of our offerings, I ask that you box up some lightly used children's books and take them to the Head Start program in whatever community you live. It will do wonders getting kids to read, giving them a passion, getting them school ready, and it would be wonderful if you would do that. And for the first program in the first Golenbock University of 2018, I think it went quite splendidly. Thank you, guys.
I thank you, too, and everybody have a wonderful New Year.
We'll catch you next week, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Al, be well.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.